Hello, I am Tip Top Gaming here today with another Magic the Gathering Arena video. Now, as you know, I guess today or technically yesterday, the new update for MTG Arena came out, and with it comes the new Chronicles that hand out basic land as a reward. And the first of the new events is Ravnica Guild Battle, where instead of being limited to guilds of Ravnica and Ravnica Allegiance and War of the Spark, instead they actually give you the deck. The only catch is you don't actually get the cards. So you just get to pick one of these and play with it and try to get to 6 wins with it. Which I think is actually kind of interesting, and it's a new type of event that's never been done before. I think that it'll either lead to really great gameplay or really bad gameplay depending on how these decks work. And so as we go through them, I'm going to kind of see how well they're going to work. Because this could either be really slow and basic gameplay, or it could be really intricate, really using each guild's mechanics to its advantage. And if that's the case, I think it's going to be really fun, but if it's just really basic, it's going to basically be luck. It's going to be like the Momir Vig event all over again. I enjoyed the Momir Vig event for the beginning, but then I kind of got bored. At least here, it's not as luck dependent, and it's either going to be really luck dependent or really skill dependent. I think that basically how these decks were designed is going to basically decide the fate of this event. So I figured we should go through all of the decks. The first one is Golgari Swarm, and I think from what I read, each one comes with one Mythic. So this Mythic is Underrealm Lich. And one thing I want to look at, because this is kind of like a sealed event in a way, but not really. I just mean some basic things are going to win. Like flying creatures are really good in limited events, but they could also be really good here because you can't, account for that. And looking here, this does have a decent amount of removal, but what I'm really going to be looking for is what can deal with flying creatures. Gift of Strength can deal with flying creatures. Crawl Harpooner can deal with flying creatures. And obviously Murder Spells can deal with flying creatures. And that's it. That's actually pretty fine. I think this is a pretty generic Golgari deck. There's just payoffs for having lots of creatures in your graveyard, like Lawless Giant, and things to feed your graveyard, like Glowspore Shaman. And I think it does a nice balance of cards with payoffs, but I mean, honestly, I think a couple more cards with payoffs for things being in the graveyard might be better. We have, Crawl Harpooner and Rhizome Lurcher, Izoni, and Lolith, which are, I think that might be a good number, but maybe one more different type of thing would have been good. Or maybe change the Mythic out to be something that benefits from things being in the graveyard instead of something that feeds the graveyard. But I noticed this has a shock land. I assume they're all going to have a shock land for the Guild Gate 7. 10 of each land type. But yeah, I think it's pretty good. It has a nice mix of murder spells, and I think it's going to do well. It has a weird mana curve. I'm going to not spend as much time on each of these. Cult of Rakdos. The Mythic here is Spawn of Mayhem. It's an interesting one. This deck is pretty much all direct damage. Literally everything here is direct damage. Almost everything here is either direct damage or removal. So I think this deck could be potentially powerful, as you could get rid of your own creatures, and then basically this is kind of like a burn deck. A burn deck with a couple big creatures like Spawn of Mayhem. And it's not full burn, but it has a lot of indirect damage. So I think that this could be good, and of course it does have the Blood Crypt here. And of course the mana curve is really weird. Oh, and flying creatures. I mean, there's lots of murder, and so they can kill all the little flying creatures. I guess one thing to note is that if none of them have flying creatures as a threat, it's not that big of a deal. Here's another interesting curve. Again, a Shockland. I'm going to stop pointing that out now. The Mythic here is Hydrants Crisis, which is a very powerful Mythic. And yeah, this just looks like a bunch of counter dump. So I'm assuming Golgari's going to be graveyard stuff. Rakdos is going to be kind of burn. Simic is going to be counter dump and, making one creature really big. Or I guess you could make lots of creatures really big. But this runs a nice variety. It has Zagana in here. It's kind of just a generic Simic deck that uses a decent amount of adapt. Actually, it doesn't actually have that much adapt in the actual deck. I think a couple of other good payoff cards for things with counters might have been nice, such as the one that gives everything flying, but then again, giving things flying is no joke, so I think it might be a good thing it's not in here. But yeah. Then we have Selesnya Conclave, and this, of course, is going to be the Swarm deck, and so each guild kind of has its own mechanic, and this is just going to swarm you with lots of little creatures. Healer's Hawk, which is a really good card, Hunted Witness, Take Heart, Might of the Masses, all really good in Swarm decks. Take Heart's really good. Just rampy stuff. I'm sorry for that. Rampy stuff. And it does have a little bit of removal. It has 3 things of removal. It has lots of healing. And it just overall is a pretty good thing. The Mythic Rare is a March of the Multitude. And I think one of the weirder cards in here is Tolsmir, Friend of Wolves. I know it creates a token, but it feels very out of place with no other payoffs in the entire deck. So I think it just kind of feels awkward in here. But I guess they were like, oh, we need some representation from War of the Spark, because I'm 99% sure. Oh, that's not it. But they probably wanted a rare from War of the Spark in here, so that's probably why it ended up getting in here. We have the GRUEL clan, which the mythic here is that worm, I'm going to assume. Yes. This is just going to be your typical big green creatures, rawr. Ramp into green creatures, although this doesn't have any ramp, which I think is kind of disappointing. I think a ramp would have made this a lot better, but this is your typical creature deck. Just, powerful creatures, hasty creatures, kind of all that. Some win cons here include Enrace Forerunners and Ravager Worm, although they're kind of weak. I wish there was a little bit of ramp to get you up to these expensive cards a little faster, but again, they're trying to balance it. They do have ways of dealing with flyers in here, but do they have any, flying creatures themselves or reach? Not really. They do have artifact removal, and enchantment removal, which I haven't seen much of, but based on, the guilds themselves in their sets, I don't think GRUEL's going to do that well, although I do like the deck, and, it does have a little bit more of a typical curve, so that could prove just to be a better fundamentally built deck. We have the Boros Legion, which again has a nicer curve. This will probably be one of the ones I like, and probably one of the more used ones, because this is going to be the rush deck, and the reason this can be used is because people want to, as much as Wizards spends all this time to create the event, people want to get the event done with. Sure, if people enjoy it, they're going to keep playing it, because it counts towards their daily wins and all that, but a lot of people want to get the quote-unquote stress of getting 6 wins done with, so they can be like, all right, I don't have to do this event anymore. I can stop, because you have 3 days to get 6 wins, so that's 2 wins a day, or just 6 wins on one day, which is probably what a lot of people are going to do. And basically, this just allows you to either win or lose really fast, and I think that's going to cause it to be more popular. It seems to have a lot of instants and sorceries in here, although it does have a decent amount of just rushy stuff. And of course, Aurelia is the mythic. Next, we're going to talk about House Damir. Here, our mythic, I believe it was on the front, but I don't remember what the front was. It's not a Trada. It is, well, we're going to go through this. So, this is going to be, I guess, one of the more control-y colors. I don't know, Damir doesn't fit as well into a category of creatures as well as a lot of the other ones did. Let me actually go back to see what the mythic is. Oh, it's this. No one cares about you, Alexa. Sorry about that. So yeah, they all have fit this kind of standard theme, and I guess in the past, Damir has been melee and kind of control-y. Here it looks kind of control-y. You get to both control your draw as well as kind of control the opponent and then get big creatures from it. It looks like you're going to be killing them with Surveil with things like Whispering Snitch and Damir Spybug. And it doesn't look super control-y, but I think that's really what Damir is kind of control. But yeah, you have the big 6/6 creature here. The Izzet League, which is another one I might be playing. This one is all about instants and sorceries. This is the one I have looked at. Its mythic is, I don't know. What is its mythic? I will find it eventually if it has one. Because Niv Mizzet is actually not a mythic. Oh, it's Thousand Year Storm. So this kind of just runs a lot of instants and sorceries and has payoffs for those instants and sorceries, such as Firemind's Research, Electrostatic Field, Runaway Steam Can, and I guess Thousand Year Storm basically adds Storm to all your cards, except it only counts for instants and sorceries. And then you also, basically this is just payoffs for instants and sorceries, running things like Drakes. And that's pretty much this whole deck. I think this is going to be a fun deck to play, but I've played a lot of it, so I might go towards something I don't have a lot of the cards invested in, because I've invested a lot in Is It. This also looks like a fun deck. So this deck is kind of like the Aristocrat decks, but not really. This deck just cares about when your creatures die, and it runs a couple things I really like. It seems to run a lot of removal. I mean, it has some Despark, it has Mortify, it has Kai's Wrath, it has Plague Crafter, it has, I believe this one removes things, yes, Consume. It has Revenge, which is not removal, but this is removal for anything with 1 toughness. It just has a lot of removal, and it cares about when your creatures die, and it has like payoffs for that. And I really like that kind of deck as well. It's the first deck I've seen with a board wipe, and for some reason when I play Magic, I get really overwhelmed when there's a lot of creatures. And I know a lot of the time, I can just play bigger creatures, and that kind of nullifies it. But in my mind, I'm just like, because I'm a control player, I'm just like, I have to board wipe. And so having the option of a board wipe, or at least having the hope that, a board wipe might be there eventually, I think will maybe bring me to this deck. And of course the Mythic is Sarah of the Scales. And then we have Azorius, which I think is going to do the worst because its mechanic itself is kind of weak with Addendum. But looking at this, it actually doesn't look like Addendum is that big of a deal here. This is, of course, a very control-y one. Here's another time board wipe. But we kind of just have this life gain, control-y kind of thing here. A lot of things, just controlling your opponent and then killing them. Your Mythic here is Angel of Grace, which I think is interesting. I don't know if that would have been my choice of Mythic. But overall, I think this deck's going to be one of the least played because Addendum is a poor mechanic. I think if I were to have designed that Azorius one, I may have leaned a little bit away from the Addendum, even a little more than they did. And maybe, because I know they were trying to do a Mythic from the set, and I mean, I know none of the other ones have Planeswalkers, but I think it might have been a better option to throw in something like a Dovin, or even if you threw in Dovin Architect of Law, or I think Emergency Powers could have been interesting, even with the Addendum in there, but I think Angel of Grace is just kind of a weak choice. I think that the decks that see the most play will be the Boros deck, and probably somewhere. I mean, Boros I think is going to see the most play because it's the fastest, and then maybe some like Cult of Rakdos. I think Red is going to really rule this. Maybe some Simic and some. I think Blue and Red are going to rule this, and so. But I don't think the Is It League specifically is going to do the best. I think Cult of Rakdos and Boros Legion, and then like these 3 are going to do really well. Not Azorius, obviously, but. That's my thoughts on the guild battle. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.